Mukhtara, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Would you be so kind as to tell people who you are, where you're from, a little more about you?
Oh my goodness. Who am I? Um, I am an artist, a writer, a designer, a incessant nerd. I'm from Ibadan, Nigeria. I live in Lagos, Nigeria. And I'm a Pisces. I always feel like that's very important. Everyone should know that I'm a
I
Pisces.
love that that's the last, it was a pause and then I'm a Pisces. Absolutely. What do you do, like vocationally, Mukhtara?
Vocationally, I just finished being a professor, a design professor, and I do a lot of work in design, kind of under the umbrella of design is how I think of everything. I love systems. As a HSP, I love systems. I love ecological things. So my design work is like, there's like fashion, but it's plant-based or maybe interactive, new agey, weird sci-fi materials. And then there's interior design, but it's thinking about your space and your own healing system, the things that you need. How do we incorporate like trauma-informed principles into interior design? And then I do a lot of like teaching and writing and these things where I'm essentially trying to gently infect the rest of the world with my way of seeing, with my way of seeing the world and my way of thinking about our connections and stuff in the world.
I love this. Thank you so much. For those who are in the community, Mukhtara and I have a beautiful class about this, by the way, so feel free to check that out. Mukhtara, when you and I met, you were not doing any of these things yet.
Yes.
So back then, if it's okay to revisit that, before you and I began, what were you dealing with in mind and body?
I think in mind, the way that I would describe it, kind of first abstractly, is that I'm big into astrology, right? I was in my Saturn return right before we actually properly started working together. And I was coming up against authority issues, for lack of a better word, right? So what I was feeling and understanding and sensing, which was a lot of these things and these ways of thinking already, and the deference to outside external authorities. Um, I had been in a PhD program. I was in an MFA program as well. And the tensions between what I internally knew to be true and understood and the signaling that was being asked from me.
Yes.
And the way that my own kind of authority and understanding and work was being undermined was very, very difficult.
It makes sense.
And then physically, that was reflecting in so many ways, right? So in my mind, there's so many years of build-up before you and I actually came to work together. I feel like when I graduated university, I did all my schooling in the US. So I was also from university to my PhD program and my MFA program, dealing with what I now know are adverse institutional experiences,
Yes.
right? And in some ways having language for it, just inside of communal spaces, from reading I think of them as ancestors, academic ancestors, Black feminist theory, and these types of decolonial theories. I knew that institutionally things were off. But there was an intense way that it was landing in my body, as with interpersonal things. So through all the schooling, like after I left my bachelor's and then went on to my graduate programs, that whole time I was dealing with a lot of physical symptoms
Yes.
in my body. That in a way I understand as like a mismatch, the tension of the mismatch of like, I know something, I understand something, and I'm dealing with these institutions.
Yes.
And in a larger way, this world, right, that is
Absolutely. It's
right?
like authenticity versus systems of dominance. Who I'm here to be versus what is being asked of me to fit in body and mind and ideology.
big emphasis on ideology.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was happening. And I would say that I want to say from maybe like 2014 until when we started properly working together in 2019, I was going in and out of hospital every 3 months.
Yeah.
And I was dealing, especially that side in the US, with a medical system that has all this anti-Blackness, right? But also with a genetic diagnosis that was easily being cast off as like, oh,
Yes.
this is what that is, you're fine.
Yes.
It's just because you have this diagnosis, this label, this genetic disposition, whatever, right? And I was just like, no, that's not what this is. I've had this thing my whole life. I understand for myself how it functions, and this is not what's happening. And so that went on like that until about 2020,
Yes.
until 2020, going in and out of hospital and
It's
having
very
the
traumatic in itself, having to interact with those systems and knowing, yes, I have this condition, but something is different, and having nobody to support
Mhm.
that, to validate that, to get curious about that. That in itself adds so much more stress on your system.
Mhm. And I feel very passionate from the institutional perspective of health as well because of
Mhm.
this. I was laughing the other day because I remember being a PhD student in 2014 and um, going to the campus health center and telling them like, oh, I have IBS, I'm dealing with IBS. And then being like, that's not a real diagnosis.
Wow.
And how long actually it's taken until now, this is totally recognized, right? IBS
Yes.
is completely recognized as a valid diagnosis. I think back then, too, the only treatments that were being offered to people was SSRIs
Yeah.
still. And I personally did not want to do that. And I'm really, so this is my nerdy brain, like very much my academic brain. I'm really curious and do a lot of investigations on systems and processes of legitimacy.
Mhm.
So it's like 4 or 5 years ago or 6 years ago, this was a thing that was not real. And now there's so much literature on it.
Yes.
There's so much on it. There's so much study. And that kind of dovetails into my like nerdy disposition for science and different kinds of sciences, which is a big part of my passion now. So I feel like a sense of being encouraged by
Mhm.
the way things have unfolded.
I'm glad. Is that nerdy side, is that what led you to this kind of work, working with the brain and the nervous system and the mind body
Oh my
connection?
God. The deep joy that I've gotten from learning about neuroscience from you and continuing to learn about neuroscience from you is like, it was like 8-year-old me again, which is like the last person or the last part of you that's like getting to play and be a part of your life when you're like dealing with like graduate directors and dissertations and you need to do this final thing and also you're sick and just all this stuff that's
Yes.
really stressful. I'm so serious. I need to finish this Mark's paper and I need to do this and I need, and so that was a big part of it for me. That my like nerdy part coming into the work. It also gave me in this world of I had done so much research myself,
Mhm.
everything felt like what in the heck is going on? I don't know. There's all this information, right? It was very grounding for me because I didn't feel like I was relying on some celestial spirit alone to come down, and that sense of security that, like,
Yes.
okay, this feels real, and it also feels integrated
Yes.
with other ways of knowing that
Absolutely.
yeah.
Good.
And
I'm glad.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
was
often very safety creating for people when they learn, like, oh, the mind body connection is validated by science, and this is what happens, and this is why I have this multi systemic presentation of pain, digestive system, different things, mental health wise, that it tracks back to early life experience, later institutional experience. It's very validating, and it often helps people start to relate to their unique body instead of just getting a label that feels frightening from outside. That's what I saw with you, that helped to start to kind of stabilize you and stabilize your system.
Mhm.
What was that like to change your orientation from trying to get rid of these symptoms to building a relationship with your mind and body and coming to understand you? What was that like?
I made that face because I'm just like, oh my God, not the easiest. Because I'm like type A. I was in the US immigrant, that background of like, it
Absolutely.
needs done. We are finished, we're getting it has to happen, sort it out. So I will say that there's been ebb and flows.
Yes, I know.
Um, it's almost like it's like a small miracle,
Mhm.
a massive miracle, really, because it's like, you mean that I can just be these things
Mhm.
that I've had to manage? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
These things about myself that I felt like I've had to be, always keeping in line.
Yes,
Um, I feel I still, obviously I'm still cultivating this voice and approach of
yes,
kindness to
of course.
myself and to my body. But I feel like a magician sometimes when I'm doing it, because there's something that happens where I can feel my own power and influence, and
Yes.
I actually feel the sensations of kindness
Mhm.
in my body. And I just think that that's so beautiful. There's something magical about it, and it's been coming home for me. It's been like a homecoming, right? That has also allowed a sense of intimacy to my ancestry,
Mhm.
to the things that I hold dear, um, in a very, very deep way, to kind of like sink into my body even more. And that has been very, very joyous for me. And I experienced a lot of loss. I have very deep sibling grief, and from these losses, from the loss of my siblings when I was younger. And there is something about this process, about being able to move away from forcing and fixing with my
Yes,
body, that has also allowed the grief to be present,
yes,
that has allowed the grief to be less dangerous,
indeed.
and then has allowed like an intimacy, not just with my body, but also with my siblings who are not my ancestors. And I remember telling myself that I was going to make sure to talk about that, as we
Thank
spoke
you.
to.
I'm really glad you have, love.
Because so it's like, okay, I have this sibling grief, I have early childhood trauma. My siblings both transitioned very suddenly and unexpectedly, and within 6 months of one another. And then I have been given this diagnosis, right? From childhood.
Yes,
And I really feel like it's important to, when possible and when it feels good for us, to talk about these things that we come to the work with, because I haven't met anybody who is working quite with that collection of
mhm,
stuff, right? And I'm just so sure that there's so many other people out there that have it in their mind that like, oh, well, this is not going to work for me because
Absolutely.
the doctors told me that this thing was genetic and therefore I just have to deal with these symptoms, whether or not I actually think it's coming from these things the
Yes.
doctor. Or I've had these deeply, deeply painful experiences that I've never met anybody that can relate to them or that. So it must mean that I have to live with this and
Yes.
that nothing can help me. I'm not sure where I quite was. I'm sure there was at least some touches of that
Yes.
when I
There were.
started working in
I
2019.
remember. I remember. And Mukhtara,
Um,
that is, I'm just going to pause you for a moment to say, that is normal and that makes sense too in a system that is very protective of such a deep traumatic grief. The system protects, and we will end up in those times with beliefs like, oh, it's not for me, it's for other people because this is too big. And when I hear that from people, it's just a sign to me how this person is hurting. And at some point, when it is right for them, we will be able to welcome that in too.
mhm, mhm.
So that makes sense, love, that you came with that. And it is, those experiences are so big, they feel very isolating. Nobody else has gone through something like this because you're so wounded, you move away.
Yes.
Takes so much courage to move towards in the way that you have, and the time and tenderness in a quick fix society that we have now of trend driven trauma healing. That really reverential, deep, respectful trauma healing takes time to stabilize a system, to build relationships so you can meet your grief and reconnect to your siblings in this way. You have been an incredible model of that.
Thank you so much.
So carry on, love. What was that like to realize, oh, it's bound up together? My body hurts and my system is not able to regulate because I am carrying such a burden of grief and early experience.
I still think about this. It's
Mm.
almost as though I'm perpetually having this revelation and a sense of relief around
Yes.
it. I remember in 2016, way before I'd even seen your Instagram or had any conversations with you, I I was dealing with a lot of post-traumatic stress
Mhm.
symptoms. I decided to take a break, what I thought was a break from my doctoral studies. And I remember finding a functional doctor, and I was like, oh, I really need help here. And the very good, thorough, I think the intake even asked about trauma, which, like then that's like unique, right? She was
Mhm.
great, wonderful. Was a Black woman as well. So that was supportive and helpful for me. I was not in a good way. I was housing insecure at the time. I'd now this identity that I'd associated so much with, which was
Yes.
successful academic. I did my bachelor's at an Ivy League university. My ability to sense that I could survive and take care of myself and be okay was deeply bound up in my identity as an academic. And so that was gone now. It was like, okay. So I remember going to her, talking to her, and leaving, paying for my thing and my whole entire bank account. It was all the
Oh,
money I had. I think maybe it was the session was like 1,500 or
oh my
something like that.
goodness.
I maybe had like 1,600 in my account, all my money. And I was reflecting on that and follow-up conversations that I had with her. Because the amount of relief from understanding that it's not one job over here and then another job over here. Because I remember being in her office thinking about it like that. I
Yes.
was like, okay, once I fix this body stuff, I need to also go and get a psychologist and fix this brain
Mhm.
stuff, right? And so understanding that they're not separate,
Yes.
just like, oh my God, this is a cheat code. This is huge. And such amount of relief, especially for my inner survivor tick list checker that's like, okay, we maybe call the insurance to go and get this, and you get to find a therapist, try to find one that's not going to mess up your head even more, and then try to do this, and then, oh, I need to go buy groceries, I need food stamps, I need to apply for you know.
I do.
That was massive, and it continues to be massive. And I will also say that is again like I feel quite lucky because I feel that from my sensitivity as a HSP, from my nerdy interests, from my indigenous gifts and indigenous wealth as an indigenous Yoruba person, it was almost like I was already having weird like dreams that were like a shadow,
Yes.
like trying to hint this to me. But those weird dreams were actually in my creative work and in my
That's awesome.
research, right? So this same time that this was happening, I remember one time having a conversation with this doctor, and I was in a stairwell at a friend's place who was documenting this fashion project that I did about, I was exploring the Yoruba concept of heart and mind, but we have a word for it. It's a heart mind.
What's the word, Mukhtara?
It's okan.
Thank you.
In Yoruba cosmology. So it's just like, it feels nice because you're like, okay, yeah, I knew this intellectually. It was starting to come down here a little bit, right? And I had like a thing about it, like a part of me was like, no, we need to be seeing the world in this way. All my Black feminist ancestors and decolonial Chicana feminist ancestors that I had read were talking about this thing about thinking and feeling not being these two separate things, how that's a colonial legacy. And so, in its own way, my life brought me to the very, very real lived experience of that, of embodying that, and living that and understanding how much it could give to me with the right support and the right tools.
It's a beautiful thing, right? To have somebody hold you because your gifts were right there, like tap dancing in front of you. And they're often right next to your biggest challenges, right? That challenge and that wound, but your gifts are there to help you work with these. You were very ready when we began, and all I needed to really do was keep holding up a mirror and asking you. And this all started to move for you at a pace that was right for you. And I want to really reiterate that. CPTSD, developmental trauma, whatever we want to call it, goes at the pace of trust. You cannot push it. It is disrespectful to our system, to different parts of us, to try and fix and push through. And yes, it's a journey for all of us because we have this imprint of fix it. And we have survival parts of us that are like, just do it, just make sure it's all okay, do the thing. But really, where the deep safety comes from is this very layered honoring of what emerges when it is time to. And that has been beautiful to see in you making your own links in your own way and not having someone tell you how to do it or how to be. And I'm really glad I got to be here with you as you self-healed, Mukhtara, because this has been an inside job.
I feel sorry, but thank you so much. And it's so wonderful to hear you talk about me being very ready and you just holding up a mirror, because when you're in that place, that is not how you feel.
No, it's not.
You don't feel capable. You don't feel on the right track.
Yes. You're scared. We're all scared.
Very scared. And all these internalizations of ableism and all these things around you, right? Being like, oh, there must be something, there's just something wrong. There's just something wrong. And I think it's really magical and powerful that that can exist. And despite that existing, we as human beings are still able to hold and be in the presence of this other part of us that actually.
Absolutely. What was that like growing influence as we started to work together and you did start to stabilize? You know, your health did start to improve. What was that like knowing you could have influence over yourself when you took care of you?
Okay, so I am someone who, for lack of a better word, was very woo from when I was 16, a friend's sister gave me Marianne Williamson's book of Return to Love. So I was in some ways primed, but the how can I say that? The shadow side, for lack of a better word, or the
Yes.
negative thing that can come with that is that I knew that my mind could influence my body,
Mm.
but I was trying to influence my body like a drill sergeant, like a
Indeed.
very, very rude militant teacher or
Mhm.
something, right? And it was just more bracing.
Yes.
So starting to understand that it was actually through kindness and tenderness. Um, and sometimes that kindness and tenderness and compassion looked like releasing emotions that were not so that were not so nice or so easy. I remember when I realized, so it came in stages. I remember though, like the stage that felt the biggest for me was realizing how much anger I
Yes.
had.
Yes.
And I am someone who is socialized, raised woman, right? Like, and all the things that come with that for those of us who are socialized
Yes.
as women in this global society. Like, I'm not sure that people recognize how much it is like. Sometimes we want to say like Western society, but I'm like, I'm from Nigeria. We were colonized. Like, this is everywhere.
Everywhere.
um, Recognizing how much anger and the release of anger and then not fearing the anger so much, which is a
Yes.
unfolding process.
Yes, it
That
is.
was that was huge for me. And so I want to say we started a little bit in April of 2019 and then really, really got to work in September of 2019. And I
Yes.
started um, in April 2020 with was April 2020, internal family systems,
Yes.
psychotherapy.
Working with parts with you was incredibly beautiful. What was it like to start to meet different parts of yourself? So, for those listening, part of what I do is working with personality parts. We all have parts like facets of a diamond, and often we don't know they're there. And when we start to meet them with curiosity and kindness, they open us up to a lot of our emotions, a lot of how we protect ourselves, a lot of our gifts. So, what was that like for you, Mukhtara, when we started to meet your parts? You took to it like a duck to water.
My goodness, yes. It was like I had always like this is the thing I've been waiting for since I was
Mhm.
small. Hey, like I was one of those kids that like used to like talk to animals and was like, how do I figure out how to make babies talk to me? And how do I swear that I can. No one can still now, no one can tell me that I'm not a magician or a witch, right? So, is that part of me? And the parts work really it was like again a homecoming. I was like, yes. Also for me as a systems thinker who's like ecology,
Exactly.
what are the relationships? I
Mhm.
loved it. Having the support of the psychotherapist as well, doing that,
Mhm.
love to be able to go work with both of you was really massive for my system. And that anger coming out. I'm
Yes.
a creative person. Like I said, I'm a designer and an artist. So also being able to be like, wait, like I think this part is a DJ, or I think I want to do a DJ set with my different parts.
I
from
remember
different
the DJ. I remember this. It's
and
so
like art and all this, it was very expensive.
Mhm. Good. What I saw too as we met your parts and got to see how they worked in your nervous system and your body, we were able to start to hang out more in this somatic experience and it not be so frightening or dissociative. What's that been like with somatic experiencing, getting to feel the ebbs and flows in your body and your nervous system?
That's a really good question. It's definitely like the energy behind it is discovery.
Yes.
and almost like becoming the protagonist in your life.
Indeed.
I was a people pleaser, still kind of recovering, but really able to now shift into becoming a protagonist. And I feel like the embodiment aspect of all of this plays a big role in that, because I'm
Yes.
like, oh, there's already so much going on in here.
Yes.
There's already sensations for me to be attuned to. There's a lot of playfulness for me
Mhm.
when possible, in being present with that somatic experience.
Yeah.
Um, Earlier today, I was doing some somatic stuff, and I'm have all these things with materiality as a designer, and I was trying to get myself to. I was asking myself like, oh, what does it feel like? Is it a pushing? Is it a? And then I was like, my friend, what are the textures? What
Yes.
material is it?
Good.
Is it
Good.
clay? Is it wood? Is it glass? Is it what's? And I was like,
Wonderful.
just even being able to do that is the
Yes.
legacy of, that integrative work.
Good. Good.
Um, yeah, I find it magical, and it really is able to positively contribute to a lot of different areas of my life.
I see. Okay, I've watched as you've been able to stay with your somatic experience of different parts of you, of your emotions, of growing more inner safety here. I've watched you take up more space and rebuild trust that the world can have things for you and you'll be brave enough to let them in. And I watched you go from, a very tough place when we started. You did not have a lot of health or material or security in any way. I watched you start to be able to create that and have the safety to hold it, because it's also scary to let things in. And people, I don't think, talk about that enough with trauma, of the fear of letting things in. What if it goes? And what could
Mhm.
happen if I take up space?
Mhm.
And people pleasing, there's that appeasement that you will find in systems of dominance in many groups that has to be there. Okay.
Yes.
And to actually start to hold yourself will also bring up fear and insecurity. And it's been a huge act of courage, Mukhtara, to start to hold yourself in the world and let things in. And yeah, I watched your life change and you start to get back to work and bring in, important work for you in many ways that's allowed you to move home. What's that been like?
Hey, can I just say, firstly, to give like the full kind of, I was afraid to even apply for jobs
I know, love.
because I was just like, I, how I, you know?
Yes.
And I went from that to first doing a job that allowed so much rest for me and was something that I loved, for 2 years.
Yes.
And then teaching as a professor and doing all of that while navigating what are both infrastructure and legacy traumas, I feel,
Yes.
housing insecurity that overlaps, like displacement from colonialism,
Yes.
housing discrimination and anti-Blackness in the US, and all these, different things overlapping. It was a very, very profound moment when I realized, thanks to a session that you and I had, what the interplay between the trauma and the choices were.
Yes.
That was very profound. And it's been, I have to sometimes take a moment and step back. I'm coming on 1 year in September of being safely and securely housed for a full year, which I've not had that since. I'm not sure I've had that since I was a child.
Yes.
Um, I feel things coming up through the safety,
Mhm.
parts of me, um, feelings, emotions that could not express themselves
Yes.
before. I'm a massive dreamer. This goes back to why I had to tell everyone that I'm a Pisces, right? And and so there are these dreams that kind of they would come up sometimes in a scary way. from
Yes.
like my protective survival part that would almost like hijack them.
Mhm.
Do this to get money. And I'm like, but it's my dream, though. I don't want to ruin it. And those are re-emerging.
Mhm.
Uh, and to be honest, I cannot believe I'm still trying to process it. It's not like I'm like, here, I got it. But to materially have prioritized myself
Yes.
and what I wanted, everyone in my family thought I had lost it.
Mhm.
You know, my mom's like, these are intergenerational legacy
Yeah.
traumas, right? Oh, can you not move back? And now she's like, I'm moving back too, you know. So
Yeah, well done you to be the one to reclaim what you really wanted. And it was a good
yes,
thing for you to go home, and those different parts of you kind of shouldn't. And success is staying within this system and actually know that deep call for home, home in so many layered ways.
yes. Moving from also the sense of obligation or guilt around, like, you know, my parents struggled to make this a
Yes.
possibility for us to be in America, and they did all this stuff, and I'm like, and I did all the things, you know, I went to the Ivy League University, I
Yes.
did things, and just being like, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Because you have done that, now I can do this.
Exactly.
You know, you all might not be able to see it now, but there's a vision. Um, Also very incredible for me to have this experience. I'm still integrating it, to be honest. So, but I've set myself up in such a way that I can be securely housed without working,
Yes.
right? So actually, which has brought up a lot of stuff. It's
Of
been very
course. Of
me
course.
out of the mess of like, oh, what do I actually want to do? What do I actually want to do? Having a home, have this massive house. To me, massive. I think it's that I'm like, I did this by myself.
Yes.
My money, my labor, you know, and that is wild to me. And then being like, okay, I now have this massive house and I need to furnish it. And then it's like my furniture designing dreams, right? So my wild 8-year-old self, ooh, I think when I was 9, I told my mom I wanted to be a designer. Is like sending me dreams about what type of ottoman needs to be in the corner and maybe a rocking chair so I can do my
Mhm.
journaling in the morning. And
Yeah.
I'm experiencing all these wonderful parts of myself that get to come up because I have material security and because there's space for me to literally to work through these things in a different way than I've been used to
Thank
my
you.
own.
Right, the spaciousness, both physical and time and actual space. Again, just a testament to you can't push or force this. It's been many layers for you and it continues to integrate. It's very exciting though, Mukhtara, where you are and the possibility that's come from, yes, your labor and your work to heal. What are the most valuable lessons do you think you've learned from this kind of mind body work? Compassion, boundaries, not coming towards your body like the American government, the need for rest, play.
That-
What else?
oh my gosh. I'm not coming at your body like the American government is
Yeah,
like all right there at the way, way, way top of the list. My lessons on intergenerational trauma and healing have been very profound for me.
yes.
Um, my mom is such a lovely woman, and we've been through a lot of things.
Yes, you have.
And you know, for me as an indigenous African person, I have had these experiences where the kind of dominant white Western psychological conventions of how to approach intergenerational trauma really ask us to move away from the part of us that's like, but I love my mommy. And you know, I'm such a mommy's baby. I've always been like this. And so even as of very recently, actually learning that when it's safe, we're safe. And I know that this is not for everybody, but for me, even situationally, being able to identify when it's safe,
Yes.
that it actually is safe for me to allow that part of myself to have a voice.
Good.
Um, that's been so huge. Fierce self-compassion.
Yes.
Yes,
I'm glad.
massive one.
I'm glad.
I don't necessarily recommend this for everybody, but the amount of people that have had to hear a thing or two about a thing or two
Yeah.
since I've healed
Yeah.
person to person. Yeah, based on, I'm like trying to give my disclaimer, like I'm not saying go around and cuss everybody out. That might not be the particular healing mode for you. In my case, it was.
That's
In
boundaries. That was also kind of fierce self-compassion to hold yourself, to find your voice when before there would be appeasement for safety. So yes, that makes sense to me that a big lesson for you is like when you need to fierce self-compassion to speak for
yes,
justice. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I get it.
been huge. And then not having to carry these things again, or not having to be like, damn, I wish I would, you know,
Indeed.
learning the balance, because sometimes that, it can always tip a little bit into
Yeah, a little
excess.
too spicy.
That's been very powerful, because I think it's also this thing energetically coming back online of like, yeah, but I want that and I'm going to do the thing.
Yeah.
I experienced a lot of chronic fatigue when I was very
Yeah.
symptomatic, right? And so the what became the go-to was to, excuse me, what became the go-to was to like pull back.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can do it, just don't do it. And now being able to, over time, more and more, be like, yeah, I'm gonna try.
Have choice. Have choice. Did you see it? Have choice to move forwards. Yeah, instead of that bracing against, which is part of chronic stress response, move away from, because the system just has no capacity to over time have choice to engage.
Mhm,
Huge.
mhm.
And with that comes more energy.
Mm.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much, Mukhtara. What would you say to somebody considering this kind of way to heal conditions like chronic pain, chronic fatigue, all these long-term conditions that we get that stem from trauma, from chronic stress? What would you say to somebody considering this work?
Besides do it, um, I think this notion of self-compassion, that all human beings suffer, right? And that there's someone else feeling the way that you feel, even though you might not know them or you can't
Yes.
imagine them, comes to mind. Because I really feel like that's what it gives a space for
Yes.
less of isolation. And also to delve into the mysteries of yourself.
Mhm.
Again, I was this child that like was sure that I could talk to frogs if I just figured out the formula, right? I was positive. And I think if there's people that feel that way in any way, it's been such a wonderful way for me to discover those inner mysteries about myself.
Agreed.
And it's really, really magical. And I also think that, again, it's that thing where it's like, this is what is so powerful about using a holistic modality to care for yourself and address these things that are difficult, is that it's not just going to shift how
Mhm.
you experience your body. It's going to shift how your interpersonal relationships are, your sense of connection to the world around you, sense of creativity, um, so much, so much. And I think that that's even from a efficiency perspective, I'm like, it just makes sense, because it's like, yeah,
Thank you. It does.
when we come here, we might be still very efficiency focused, right?
Mhm.
Like from even just from an efficiency perspective. in the long term, it makes so much sense.
It does. Thank you. What I say is it's an emergence that begins as an emergency. And I see it in all of you guys that you just blossom and flourish in every aspect of your life, and symptoms go down almost as a side effect of that connection and that growth. So thank you for naming that. If you could go back, Mukhtara, this is a hero's journey. None of us asked for it, but it was ours. If you could go back to the start of that hero's journey and sit next to Mukhtara in that really toughest time, what would you say to her?
Okay, probably two things.
Yes.
One, you're right. I'm sure that this will deeply appeal to the type A part of me. Like, you're right. You're right. You are right. You were right. You got it. You're doing the thing. Because it's very, very profound for me to go back to these different moments of emergency, right? That then became emergent, where it was like there was this stubbornness inside of me that was just like, oh, no, 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 I'm not doing this anymore. We have to figure this out. There has to be something else, you know? And then the other part is, it's so funny. I just heard you say this on a recording from the community the other day, and it's been something that has occurred to me quite recently. And I was like, of course, me and Nadia right here. That the next step, the next tool, like in a video game, the next thing to get you to the next place, like whether it's a gem or like a cheat code portal, is right around the corner, right? I fully believe like these are the rules of the game. There just has to be whether it's support a random person that you follow on Instagram and then follow up with years later about the practice. There's something, and you'll be able to feel it, that it's the gentle thing that's taking you to where you want to go. So it's not this thing where you have to look far and you have to, and you have to going and seeking for all the things. It's like, okay, this is where I'm at. What are the things that I want to try out?
The gentle things rather than this, and I got to fix it and pull in everything because I'm screwed.
Because this is way too close to this.
It is. That is just survival and fixing. And I love that you said it's the gentle thing. Like, hey, when I'm here, and like, what is it that brings a little more of what I want to feel, or what helps me feel a little bit better? It's the gentle one thing. And then, yeah, the rest you have to let go of a little, and just the one thing, because then the next gem will come. I love those two messages. You were right, because yes, she was. Do not give in. That stubborn part of you is gold and knows so deeply that she has influence and this could be different. So you were right, reaffirming that. And the second one of like, what is the one gentle thing? You don't need to do this. What is the one thing? Thank you, Mukhtara. So what's next for you? Energy, attention in work, play, life? Where are you putting your energy and attention on next?
Oh my gosh, I'm putting my energy and attention into all my nerdy explorations, especially with others. So I started an indigenous design and healing laboratory here in Nigeria, which like merges all of my nerdy, artistic, sciencey things together, and getting deeper into my artwork.
Yeah.
Wonderful, and my creativity, in creating like community spaces.
Good.
Also for people, for like the translations of some of these lessons that I've learned into like context and culturally relevant ways. We as Nigerians have like so much collective trauma that is very, very specific to us and also overlaps deeply with globalized anti-Blackness.
Yes.
So the laboratory is dedicated to that. And I'm really, really excited for those things. And also playing with other people. I think of it's like a work stroke play, play work with other people. So I've opened up some spaces to do like consultation, coaching. I really miss teaching. I think of design and approach design so much as world building.
Yes.
Being able to do that with others who want to do that. I have my little business doing that now. Um, and also my business world building interior design in yummy, holistic ways where like people can play with their ancestral archetypes or their like favorite fantasy archetypes. I don't know. I really
I love
the
this. I love this. It's like
you know
express your parts in your home.
in your home, exactly. And it just makes me so happy. It's like that thing of reaching out
Yes.
again, and also trusting my authority,
Mhm.
this kind of inner knowings, so much reading of books, and now time to play.
I'm so glad. I will put your website under for anybody who is interested in collaborating with you and just seeing what you do because you have so much to offer the world. And thank you. It's been so beautiful to work with you, to know you, to walk alongside you, and for you to trust me as somebody that is white to be with you, Mukhtara. It has been deeply, deeply appreciated. Thank you for the trust.
Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful journey, to be honest. I'm so glad.
Thank you, love. Have a beautiful day. Thanks for being with us.